Welcome to the Mick and Pat show. I'm Mick.
I'm Pat.
And we are taking a brief hiatus this week just from our East of Eden dog-eared dialogues. We'll be doing the part 4 next week because, as everyone knows, some pretty big things just happened in the, just in America and kind of ringing out across the world. And we just wanted to kind of take a moment to speak to it and just talk about the facts and then, a little bit of our opinions of, how could this have happened and, what the fallout might have been if Trump had been assassinated. So, context wise, if you've been living on a rock, Trump was delivering a speech in Pennsylvania, just the day before the RNC, Republican National Convention. And he was just doing a speech on a stage outside when someone was on the roof of a building nearby and started firing rounds. And Trump, he was clipped in the ear and, dodged literally death by less than a centimeter, and less than like 0.5 of a second or something like that. And so all that said, pretty crazy just because this is the first time this has happened for, my lifetime, our lifetime, and a lot of people in our generation. And I think a lot of people just thought that, there's been talks around, people have been saying like, take Trump out or something like that. And I think a lot of people just didn't really understand like that we could still see something like this happen in today's day and age. And so the gravity of it is kind of starting to, I think, sink in with a lot of people. And really what it kind of means going forward for politics in our nation. There's been a lot of calls on both sides, thankfully, to really quench the vitriol between the parties, and for everyone to behave and act more presidentially, and to kind of stop the campaigns that paint one another as, less than human or something like that, which has been a lot of subject of the conversation. I know Biden had a statement about how, his campaign was going to put Trump in the crosshairs and put a bullseye on him. And that is in no way, shape, or form, I think, like credence to a plan from the deep state to assassinate Trump or anything like that. I think it is just purely like hot, aggressive political talk for putting the pressure on and trying to make the other candidate look bad and put the pressure on them for actions and things like that in policy. And so Biden campaign, a lot of people might not know this, but they've totally taken off all ads that they were running against Trump just to reframe them and be aware of like the current circumstances and kind of take a moment to breathe and recognize like this is a bad thing. It was an unacceptable thing to happen in our nation and that we got to take a new course going forward. So all that said, I know I've been doing a lot of digging. I've been part of the intelligence channels, tapping into those that like I got connections in just to try to get as much information as I can and sift through all the speculation to make sure I'm only looking at, the facts of what happened. I don't know about you, Pat. I don't know how much like research you've been doing over the past couple of days, but I think if anything, I just hope that listeners know they can hear us talk about it from like, a pretty like objective point of view of just like what happened. And, it's not going to be, this is not in any way, shape or form going to be a podcast painting, the Democrat Party or the liberals or the conservatives or Republicans in a bad light. This is just simply to talk about like the facts of the assassination, what happened, and then kind of like speculation of like what would have our country been the next morning if Trump had been killed. You know what I mean? Because I think there's been a lot of people talking about that too. So I kind of want to give you an opportunity to open up here too, Pat.
Yeah, no, because I think there's two big main things in this conversation, which is like the big view that you're speaking to is one, like the general state of many people here who, what is the political climate? What is the people seeing other people as enemies? And the and as we've seen from reactions on both sides around the, some people maybe attributing Trump's survival to like an act of God, and others on the other side maybe like actively posting that they're upset that the guy missed.
Yeah.
And so like there's a conversation to be had around like just the political climate. Where's people's minds at? Where do they value human life and have general respect, human decency, these things? And then the other conversation is like the just straight breakdown of like in those, basically what was about, 10 minutes of time, what happened? How did it happen? Who did what? Where were their failures in security? Where were their failures in to act? Or where was there also successes in those? So in like a kind of a breakdown of the moment of what happened there. And I think that it's kind of two different conversations that we can have kind of throughout the same time, but because there is like a heaviness to the situation, as well as then there's also just like the kind of the brass facts and of, okay, like gonna just speak to this in some cases we'll just speak to this as, objectively, here's what happened, here's what we saw, here's what we think, about the actual event, because it is kind of, there's two different things going on here that need to be addressed.
Yeah. So let's just kind of start out with what occurred. So it was on Saturday, which was July 13th. And Trump was giving the speech in Pennsylvania, and an opening speech just to kind of get his supporters, excited and about the RNC convention stuff. And rumor had it that at that speech he was going to announce who his VP pick was going to be, which he later announced today on July 15th. But while he was in the midst of speaking, there started being a couple cracks of like gunfire or pops. A lot of people thought at first like it might have been fireworks, and then we can see Trump put his hand up to his ear and then ducked down, and that as seen in some of the photographs posted by photographers that were there, was the rounds just like barely missing Trump. And unfortunately some of those rounds did strike some of the people there to see the speech, taking the life of one man who moved to protect his wife and daughter when the shots started, and he did lose his life. His name was Corey. I can't remember his last name, but he was a firefighter, true red-blooded American, and died protecting his family. So it wasn't without tragedy. And a couple other people, two others were critically wounded. They're still in critical condition from what I understand. But Trump was clipped in the ear. He went down. Secret Service rushed the stage and surrounded him. And there's a clear, different percussion sound from the Secret Service snipers who were on the roofs behind Trump that returned fire. And I think it was just one shot of return fire, which neutralized the assailant. And after that, Secret Service cleared that shooter was down and got Trump back up, which infamously now is kind of being heard because it's kind of fun, like funny or silly. But he's saying, "Wait, let me get my shoes. Let me get my shoes," because apparently, from what I've read, he was wearing some very like good luck shoes from his grandfather. It was like shoes his grandfather wore, and he's been wearing them on the campaign trail. which is like definitely like almost like a classic adrenaline response, right? Of like certain things become a priority even in the midst of like chaos, where like your adrenaline dump response might not be helping you think clearly. So he's trying to grab his shoes, and then as they're moving him off, he says wait, and we can hear all this because he's mic'd up still when they're trying to move him off. And he says wait, turns and pumps a fist up in the air with blood across his face, which is now this like infamous photo that is just going around. And I gotta say, it's a very American photo. It's a photo of a strong presidential candidate standing up and, encouraging his supporters to essentially stand their ground and fight, to not be swayed by this, act of evil. And regardless of your politics, like that image, I think is going to be just as famous as the image of, JFK's assassination, or like Reagan after he was shot, and it's going to go down in textbooks. And it is an image that, again, like I really think regardless of political opinion, like you can look at it and be like, well, that is truly like the spirit that we want displayed in America. Like if you take shots at us, like we will stand strongly and put our fists in the air. And so that's kind of what occurred. He was arrested off stage and taken to get medically checked, where it was, reported that he had taken around through the top of his ear. The assailant was using a AR style rifle, is what they say. They haven't released like if it is an actual AR-15 or whatever, but using .223, which if you ask anyone who's familiar with firearms and munitions, the .223 round is like the most common intermediate rifle round in America. It's what's used in the majority of AR platforms, and that round does some pretty quirky stuff when it goes into a human body. And like people have been shot, and said like round went in their shoulder, came out the back of their neck. Because it can zip and curve off of bone quite a bit, because it is a small bullet at moving at high speed that can really ricochet and do funny things. And a lot of people have hypothesized while like rebuilding the angles that the round might have went through his ear and like actually rolled across the back of his head. And like that's why the photo was able to capture it, because it was moving slower after like essentially changing course off of like the back of his head. And if it was a higher caliber round with a lot more weight behind it, it probably wouldn't have changed course. It probably would have gone through his ear and just taken out a side of his head. And so it's also pretty crazy when they review the footage. He literally turns his head
at the moment.
Yeah. Like, like I said, 0.5 of a second before the first shot comes through. And like that turning of his head definitely saved his life. Now, to some of the other facts that we've gotten about like the shooter and all that, the shooter, I'm not going to say his name. I don't like to give credit to anything about those people or promote their names or anything like that. But he did, he was 20 years old. He has a weird history, doesn't seem to have any history of crimes or anything like that. No criminal charges previously. He was reported to have been heavily bullied in school by former classmates of his that were interviewed. He at one point was donating to the Democratic Party, and then in 2022 registered as a Republican. And not saying that any of this validates like who he was or his decisions, right? Like you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater and generalize, right? I'm just speaking on like his history that we know that's been released so far. And like none of his family had any reason to believe he was going to take an action like this. It's kind of like the classic, lone wolf shooter that we've heard before, right? Is like there wasn't a lot of warning signs, just a troubled individual. What is interesting, though, is that Secret Service had identified the building that he climbed on top of as a security vulnerability. And they still didn't have operators on top of that building to secure it, or any Secret Service individuals on the ground near the building to secure it. And about 3 to 4 minutes before the shooter took his first shots, he was seen by people outside of the rally scaling a ladder to get on the building with his rifle. And people are literally recording it on their phones, saying there's a man with a rifle climbing on this building, tell the police. And they go and tell the police. And apparently now a report has come out. At first it was that the police didn't report anything. They didn't take it seriously. But it seems now reports come out officially that the police did radio and inform Secret Service, hey, we have reports of a man with a rifle climbing on this building, which aligns with what we see in the rally. If we watch the footage from multiple angles, we can see that these 2 Secret Service snipers behind Trump, to his right, technically, they are aware and identifying something, which is the shooter on the other roof. And we can see that they are looking through their optics on, they're working with seriously like high-end precision rifles, bolt action rifles. And a lot of people have been, reviewing the optics they had. They might be, 40x optics for some pretty precise long-range shots. And as they're looking, we can see them taking their eyes off the optic and seeing like how close the shooter is and trying to gauge, because those optics are probably zeroed at a range well beyond 100 yards. And the shooter was within 140 yards of Trump, which, if you're not familiar again with ballistics and rifles and, how hard a shot might be, 140 yards is like,
easy.
It's easy peasy. It's what like elementary schoolers can do with 22s. Yeah. As if with a little bit of practice, let alone something with more power behind it. And like majority of hunters, I would argue, most of the time are taking shots at deer successfully beyond that range. And so for anyone who's not familiar, like this was an easy shot. Yeah. This was a shot that was well within like what should have been a secure perimeter. And when we see the Secret Service men, the snipers on the roof, trying to dope their scopes and adjust for such a close target, everyone was wondering, why didn't they shoot sooner? Now, I don't have any official report out here or facts with that, but it does seem like there is some people who have spoken anonymously online that they were trying to get permission to take the shot, and permission was being held up. Now, I'm not saying someone said denied it, right? Because it could be like, hey, we see a man with a rifle. It looks like he's like, trying to take position to fire on the, the presidential candidate. Permission to fire. And it could be someone like, hold on, we need to verify. Hold on, we need to get verification if you're aiming at the right thing. All of that, honestly, to say like, if the threat had been taken serious initially when multiple eyewitnesses, dozens of people were telling the police what was going on, this should have been handled well before that guy got any shots off. And unfortunately, due to someone or multiple people in that chain of command, a man lost his life, 2 people critically injured, presidential candidate Trump was injured, and we were put in a pretty tense situation politically as a nation. And so there's a lot of quarterbacking going on right now, right? And the Secret Service is under some serious scrutiny for, why certain things weren't done and extra precautions taken. But those are like the brief, high level facts of the shooting, what occurred, and the distances. So, and if you want to see any of those images or anything like that, they're very much like a lot of great resources online to see it mapped out from like a satellite imagery with lines drawing distance and point of views. So definitely check those out if you're more curious about that stuff and into firearms ballistics like we are. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, Pat, anything I missed? Anything else you want to fill in there?
Smoke break.
Hey Ken, it's Mick, and I've got something important to talk about. We all hope we never find ourselves in a self-defense situation, but life's unpredictable. Enter the National Self-Protection Plan from Attorneys on Retainer. an actual credible law firm you could put on retainer for your self-defense needs. For just $35 a month, you get national coverage in all 50 states for criminal and civil legal representation in self-defense situations, complete with a 24/7, 365 toll-free emergency line. That's real legal support when you need it most. What's in the package? Bail bonds, scene cleanup, firearm replacement, even mental health counseling. Plus, 0 fees for a laundry list of defense-related costs like expert witnesses. So support the show and get yourself some peace of mind. Click the link in our show notes or visit our sponsors page to sign up for the National Self-Protection Plan from Attorneys on Retainer.
Hey folks, Pat here. If you're like Mick and I, you're a fan of classic tales like Lonesome Dove, Blood Meridian, The Three-Body Problem, and Steinbeck's East of Eden. With Audible, you can dive into these epic stories anytime, anywhere. Sign up for a free month, and your first audiobook is on the house. To start your free trial and support our show, click the link in the show notes or swing by the sponsors page on our website.
Want an awesome website for your podcast? Check out Podpage. We use it for the Mick and Pat show, and it's a game changer. Set it up in minutes, no coding needed. Support the show by using our link to get started. Your podcast deserves a home as great as ours. Podpage, the one-stop solution.
No, I think that covers kind of the general, what happened and what went on. And, and I was talking to some people about this, the last couple of days, and lots of people was like, the main things people say is I've heard like, how did a guy possibly get this close? And like, why didn't you get taken out sooner? Mm-hmm. And I think like, my like opinion conjecture on is a couple things is like, first of all, from the security standpoint, like and I do think there were like misses and failures, but at the same time, there's like Trump isn't the president of the United States, meaning he does not get the security and protection that whoever holds that title gets an immense amount of security around them, whatever. I'm sure I don't know their procedures, but if I was them, I'm sure they've got thermal drones up. They've got, probably 5 times more personnel, with them. The planning ahead of time is, it's all, you're protecting the leader of the free world. So it's like you have this, like, you have a much more robust security apparatus that is also that somebody who's running for president doesn't have, as well as the fact that Trump was not technically the official candidate of the Republican Party yet until the day after, or till that evening, right? Until it was declared at the convention. And so at that point, usually guys get more security at that point as the race goes forward. Now, being a former president, he will always have a security detail. That's just part of the gig. Once you've been the president, you get security. And so with that, also lots of this Secret Service is coordinating with local law enforcement in these places too. So you have, whoever, local cops, you have sheriff's deputies, sheriffs, you have local SWAT, you do have federal SWAT units, FBI, other people around. And so you have a bunch of different groups all coordinating at one time. And so you have, I think it's very easy in a situation like this, for confusion and, communication breakdown to happen. It's almost even like, the movie Shooter, right?
Yeah.
Like I think of the Michael Pena character in the beginning of that. He's just like a street cop, kind of like in this, like, he's like, he can't actually do anything about what's going on at the very beginning of that movie, and the way he runs into the shooter, he's trying to figure out what's going on, like very much. And you have very much a situation like this here where you have, different groups trying to figure out who's doing what, who's who, what's going on. And then, now with that being said, obviously this guy got super close, and it was reported, and it, could have, should have been taken care of much faster. But then another question to have is, which I don't know, is what is within their rights to take the first shot?
Yeah.
Like because this is small town Pennsylvania. this was not on the same property that they were on for like, and yes, this is a leader in America, someone running for president, they have to be protected. But like as stringent as like the rules of engagement were even towards the end of Iraq, Afghanistan, where even those soldiers fighting a war couldn't shoot at somebody until they were being shot at, you know, like that's how strict it was at certain times. So now you take it to now on home soil. How do you approach and engage these things where, you know, when you have, and clearly these snipers, and from the beginning I was like, these guys saw that guy, and I know they saw that guy the whole time, you know, like the two snipers who were on him, because also the how fast they took him out. If they didn't know where he was, they couldn't have taken him out that fast. Like, you know,
they were aiming in his direction, you know, probably like 15 seconds before the first shots are heard in any of the video recordings.
And, you know, there is like a uncorroborated report of the guy who did take the shot saying that he was requesting for permission, wasn't getting it, like you were saying a second ago. And so, you know, I think, you know, in this situation, the specific individuals, grunts, boots on the ground, are not to blame as much as the higher ups making the calls. And also there is onus, I think, on the people. Like, I don't know, if I was just a cop walking by and I got a report of a guy on a roof, I'd be hopping on that roof myself if no one was coming over there. Now that's also, once again, we're armchair quarterbacking this thing. What would I actually do? I don't know. But, you know, it's like there was plenty of time for this guy to get even someone to go and, you know, go to where he was on that roof and see what's going on. But the other piece of this too being like, I think that we have a false sense of security in general around, like, I don't think that it's as hard as we think it is to get to somebody, even with a huge security detail. Yeah. And that's, if you talk to Secret Service agents or hear them talk about like the stress they're under, and they basically say, if you're willing to, their biggest fear is the fact that if somebody's willing to die, they cannot ultimately protect the person that they're protecting. Like, they can do the best they can, but if someone's willing to die over it, like, there's just only so much they can do, right? In that, because you can't account for every single thing, and or if you have someone who's basically on a suicide mission, it's just it's a different animal of trying to secure and figure out how to approach that. And so I think that, you know, I think it's not as hard as we think to get for someone to get close in a situation like this. Also, there was failures here. There's things that are going to be addressed. There's people who are going to, you know, get roasted for this. And, you know, they are the fact that, you know, Trump was almost killed. And then there was other people there was another person killed, and the other two, who knows if they're going to make it through their surgeries and stuff they're going through. And so, there's put tons of different angles to come at this, but one part of it is, I think I've seen a lot of, like, even the Secret Service guys who let him stand up and put his fist in the air, getting a lot of flack for, like, how could you allow that? Faster. Right, not moving off faster. Sure. And a part of me from a security standpoint agrees with that, being like, yeah, like, get him out. Also, that during this time they were checking his body, seeing what's going on. You got to make sure he's not hit. Mm-hmm. They don't know what's going on, and like they dove on him pretty dang fast.
Yeah, no, I think the response of the Secret Service men and women going up to stage, as well as like their CRT units responding, I think they responded really well, because it was clear, like, there was no hesitation to put their lives on the line to take a bullet for him. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anyone could have acted faster and got on that stage. Like, I don't care who you are on the keyboard, right? Like, I don't think you're going to respond faster than they did, because if you look at the footage, most of the crowd didn't even start ducking down before Secret Service people were on stage and covering Trump.
And something like this hasn't happened since 1981.
Yeah.
So, like, the fact is, like, the complacency could totally be there too, for, like, and not that, like, these people train super hard and do all their stuff, but, like, just the fact that, like, you know, it hasn't, like, now going forward, security at these things is going to be insane. Yeah. You know, I think, you know, and, like, and also it's going to, and they're going to re-up on all their stuff because it hasn't been since 1981 when Reagan was shot that there was something this level on a presidential candidate or president. And so I think them allowing him to put his fist in the air also, though, like, it was like from a security standpoint, while not good, because the critique being, listen, they did get to confirm the shooters down, but at the same time, you don't know if there's 2, 3, 4, 5 people involved in this, and if all the threats are actually done. So it was risky to let him do this. And at the same time, though, like you said earlier, like, there's something about, like, what do people want to see in a president or in an American is like standing back up with their fist in the air. And like this, like, was Trump taking a photo op opportunity? I'd say, yeah, he probably was. And also at the same time, like, in the moment, I think he was also like genuine in his, like, he's pissed. He just been shot. He's like, he was justified in his, like, kind of,
in his behavior,
in his primal, like, behavior to do that.
Yeah. A couple things just to add in here as well, and clarify. The victim who lost his life was Corey Comparator. There is a GoFundMe for him as well as for the other victims online. It's, verified GoFundMe. Make sure you do your research and don't get scammed. But if you want to, support his family and the families of those who are injured, definitely go check that out. He, by all means, from what we understand, was a very selfless, red-blooded American who loved his family, and he literally gave his life covering his wife and daughter. So doesn't get pretty much more good than that. It's a pretty high call, and he rose to it. And it's a tragedy that his life was lost. Additionally, just to make sure this is clear and hammered, both Biden and Trump made calls for peace and unity across the nation. There is no side of this where either of these candidates, or even RFK Jr., of course, running independent, no one is saying and blaming one side or the other right now. They're saying, hey, we got to have peace, we got to have unity. Now, for the rest of the parties and the members of those parties, right, everyone is running their mouth online and pointing fingers, and it's the blame game for sure. But the leaders of those parties we see are acting in very presidential manners to, request that cooler heads prevail. Additionally, President Joe Biden did order a review of federal security, specifically for Trump, as well as the security measures for the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. So there is a reaction of we have to take this serious, and we have to review where things currently stand. And I know it was kind of politically charged topic where RFK Jr. was being denied Secret Service protection, as well as there was a time where Trump might have not had it because of the criminal charges that he was facing. The case that was overseeing those criminal charges has been dropped in light of this, in order to make sure there's nothing preventing him from securing a security detail federally. And both RFK Jr. and President Trump have been issued higher level security from Secret Service. It's no longer topic of conversation or debate. It's been announced that they're getting it, and they're getting a higher level of security. So again, just want to make sure people know, the leaders here are trying to do what they can to make sure that cooler heads and safety are the highest priority. There is no currently finger pointing and blame game happening at that level, and withholding of safety by anyone, right? As well as no one's made any calls for retaliation when it comes to party leaders. Now, a lot of people are being dumb online. A lot of people are using violent language. There are people on the right saying we have to take the fight back to them. That is insane. I can't imagine where your head can be and think this is an us versus them thing. You know what I mean? There's
Mm-hmm.
also people on the left who are straight up flipping out, crying because the shooter missed
Mm-hmm.
and losing their mind and saying that it should have happened. It's a very nasty thing, and people are going to be awful people regardless of what their leaders that they subscribe to say and do. So we got to be sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and generalize here with left or right. And I think I speak for both of us here when we say, like, we encourage people to be, more analytical and cooler in assessing this and try to leave as much emotion out of it as possible. But with that as well, it is interesting, like when reviewing shooters' motives. So they did find the ATF, which, the ATF's full acronym is Administration of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
Mm-hmm.
But we just kind of usually chop off the explosives part. They are involved in this because explosive material was found in the assailant's vehicle.
And I think it's maybe his house too.
Yeah, and his house as well. Yeah, so there is a lot of speculation that, like, from what was reported, it was reported that he was acting shifty and behaving oddly, avoiding the metal detectors at the rally, and that was reported to police. And then it was before he left the area to be entered into the rally and went up the ladder on that other building, the police were looking for him.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a clear political motive of anything they've found so far. And the concern is that, this is what we usually see with, like, trying to gain the attention that we see from, like, other mass shooters and such, this mentality. And the fear is that, like, this is an individual whose whole motive was for recognition, not necessarily a political motivated, but, like, desiring to be famous, for the act itself. And a lot of people are drawing similarities to the individual who tried to who tried to assassinate Reagan, because his motive was to impress the actress Jodie Foster. Like, his whole motive was, like, it would impress Jodie Foster if I killed the president, which, is insanely psychotic. But we're probably looking at someone with a similar motive here, right? In regards to, like, wanting to be famous for doing an awful thing, rather than it being like, oh, I think he's just a bad politician or something like that, or oh, I'm saving America, anything like that, right? And the reason that's a concern is because usually acts like these light a candle under similar perpetrators, right? Who kind of use this as the motivation to carry out further acts. And you can't really, it's very hard to curb that behavior and diffuse it, because when it's political, you can have political leaders speak to their followers and dissuade it. But when you have people who simply want to do harm in order to become infamous, there's not much you can do to dissuade them, because they've usually already subscribe to a moralistic view that it doesn't matter who I hurt, because no one cares about me, and all that matters is that I get as popular or famous, or my name's in as many headlines or textbooks as possible. And so that's kind of the big concern now. And I've been, like, going through articles, where there's, like, people from various fields of social sciences and security just saying, like, we should be on heightened alertness, not on edge. I don't want to say on edge, because that encourages paranoia, but we should be on heightened alertness for further acts of violence at these kind of events, because this is kind of how you bring the rats out of the wood, and so, all that said, I think that, as more comes out, like, people are wondering, like, was he planning, as a, like, this is an individual that seemed to be planning to, like, sacrifice themselves for what they believed, because it seemed like if he wasn't able to get a clear shot, that he was going to use his vehicle as an explosive device to try to take out the president and as many other people. So again, we're not probably looking at something that's even related to politics as much as an individual who was mentally and psychologically broken and justifying no matter who they hurt as long as it got them famous, right? So a lot of that's kind of, being discussed across the, social science experts right now and trying to figure out like really, what the intentions and motivations were. But that seems to be kind of the latest road. Go ahead.
And with that too, it's funny because people always want to take seemingly facts about people and then immediately be able to lump them into a different group and then say, see who is that person. So like, for instance, it's like, the fact that he donated to, donated to,
I think it was Back the Blue or something like that. Not Back the Blue.
Act Blue.
Yeah, Act Blue.
But he donated to,
he donated $15.
$15 to a Democratic, organization. It was during, the Biden's inauguration day, but the, people want to grab onto that and say, see, he's, this
he's a
side.
Democrat.
Yeah. And then also he was registered Republican.
And everyone wants to be like, see, he's a gun-tone Republican.
Yeah, which is, here's the deal. I'll tell you, I have friends who are registered Republicans who always vote Democrat.
Yeah. No kidding, right.
But here's why. But they've strategically, register Republican in order to be able to vote in Republican primaries.
Oh, sure, yeah.
In order to disrupt them. Like this time around, they were voting for Nikki Haley to try to get Trump done because they wanted somebody who they thought would definitely lose against Biden. So there are people who, so we don't know what the guy's intent was with any of this, one way or the other, with any of it. But what I think one thing that is interesting is, this guy was 17 years old when Biden took office in 2021. And so he, went from...
He's never voted for a president.
Right. So he goes from being a 17-year-old high school kid to now 20-year-old who, like, his whole quote-unquote adult life was inside of, and we'll put 2020, the year 2020 in this as well. So the 16-year-old, it's 2020, just America is, at one of its most volatile points it's ever been in, highly divisive, tons of issues with, racial tensions are high. The election that year was, super politically charged climate around also just whether you're supposed to wear a mask or not, whatever. Like everything was like, this guy's existence as an adult has just always been inside of this pressure cooker. And so who knows all the whatever forums or chats he's on or the social media feeds he gets and the outside influences of the world that like formed his brain over the last 4 years. But like, I think that it could also be said this guy's probably very much a product of, the loud politically charged climate. Whereas you could have other people if you're in your 50s, you've been through a lot more. You remember, times in America that were seemingly just as divided or charged or difficult and things like that too. And so his perspective, seriously lacking perspective and stuff, as well as like it appears that he was, a loner, a bullied kid in high school. Like you do also have some of the classic makings of like your active shooter type, persona, and like,
yeah.
And who, like the person who is gonna, whether he leaned left or leaned right, he was probably going to go try to hurt somebody.
Yep.
It just in the way that, when you review these things backwards, you do see the makings of like, oh, that, less surprising.
Yeah, it was pretty humbling too to see. I mean, humbling might not be the right word, but it definitely made me reflect on, how am I actively treating, those that might be seen as outcasts. When I saw the interview with like his former classmates, I mean, his former classmates, these young men as well who are like 20 years old, and they seemed seriously, disturbed in that they recognized like, holy smokes, like no one ever did anything. No, like they were saying, you know, in their interviews, like no one ever did anything. No one ever stood up for him. No one ever invited him, sat with him. There was no group who didn't bully him in school. And, you know, it was awful. And no one said even anything in the interviews of like, I wish I had done something. You could just tell like all of them felt some level of guilt or responsibility, a little bit of like, it was very fresh in their minds of like how he was treated. Right. And, you know, as someone who helps out with, you know, high school youth, I try to really make an effort to hang out with those that don't really seem to have as much of a social circle to depend on. Not because I'm like, oh, I'm preventing an active shooter, right? Not anything like that. But just because I see like, you know, this kid might be hurting. This kid doesn't seem to have that like social outlet to have someone to open up to, and someone who is showing any kind of care or investment in them. And I think it's something that maybe like, if anything out of this, like rather than walling up and, you know, being more paranoid, maybe start extending a little bit more kindness and invitations to those who might be these outsiders, right? Like act now, you know what I mean? Like if you know someone in your school or, you know, someone in your work who seems like a loner, seems like they are shunned. I'm not saying that you need to be their best friend, but just to be like a person who is a, you know, a light in their life and shows them kindness can mean a lot. I mean, I certainly recall times where I was that loner, you know, and where I felt very much on the outside, and simple acts of kindness went a really long way to help me feel like, you know, I wasn't alone, that there were people who cared about me. And I guess I just think like, really like, you know, that's kind of probably the real thing we should be focusing on here in like order to like heal our nation and diffuse this kind of political tension, to stop othering others, you know what I mean, and start viewing them as humans. I thought Melania Trump had a really good statement that she had issued, where it was essentially just saying like, someone only saw the, you know, demonized political shell of, you know, who my husband is, and wanted to, and felt like violence against them was justified. What they didn't see was my husband, who, you know, is a fan. He loves music. He loves to read to his grandchildren. He is a family man who, you know, likes to be present with meals with his like kids. And because they didn't see he was human, it was easy to commit violence against him. And like, regardless what you think about Trump, I'm not the biggest fan of the guy, right? I think I've made it clear on several points, like, I'm not the biggest fan of what he says and how he acts or behaves, right? I'm certainly not going to say like this dude is, I'm certainly not one of the people who believes he's a good Christian, right? You know, but all that said, like, I do see him as a human, same way as I see, you know, I've never really liked Biden, but dude, my heart breaks to see him in his current state. And it seems like no one cares about him. It seems like people are just kind of puppeting him for whatever they can get out of him right now. And he seems like a man who's not really getting good care.
Right.
And, you know, same thing with like RFK Jr. I don't have a lot of opinions about him yet. Right. You know, I've only been listening to him speak on things, but I still see him as a human who has already had 2 attempts on his life. You know, a lot of people forget there was a guy who tried to get to RFK Jr. when he was in a rally in California, and he was posing as a U.S. Marshal, had firearms on him, and when interviewed, all he would say over and over was, my plan was to get as close to RFK as I could. And it's just like dude, these are just countless examples of people who are dehumanizing
and that
others.
Guy in particular is RFK. He's lived a life a little bit close to assassinations.
Yeah, his uncle at 10 was killed, and then his father was killed. Yeah, you know, assassinated. I want to make sure I specify assassinated. And if you just stop for a second and realize like they're people, then maybe you'll kind of rethink, you know, how you're going to treat them, and is it really worse to like drop your morals and be vindictive and venomous towards them, or is it better to like at least know when you go to bed at night, like, regardless of how nasty other people are, you were able to treat them as human beings and be better than that.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just how I see it, and that's how my wife and I have been talking about it a lot, because neither of us are super political.
Mm-hmm.
We have our political beliefs, but neither of us are very pro one candidate or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And it certainly is something that, like, I think breaks our hearts when we're just like, what mentality do you get to at what point where they stop being humans and they're just things they're just objects in which you are allowed to, in your mind, take violence against. Like that's a pretty low road to reach mentally, psychologically.
Definitely. I agree. And I think that, like, we were talking about, this, the shooter in particular, who's, loner, bullied guy, but also, like, what's surprising is the amount of, like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people out there with loud voices saying, like, that they're upset that he didn't achieve his mission. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so that shows too that it's not just a disease or, like, that's going on with, like, a select group of, like, a very, like, small, outcast bit of society. It's like, it's kind of it's a deep-seated, like, a social contagion within, like, a lot of people that they've affected, like, and on a sliding scale, all the way from, like, people legitimately, like, outspoken, upset that Trump's not dead, over to people who are just kind of like, like, I don't care, like, that it even happened, or like, or I'd be indifferent if it had happened, like, that sort of thing. And I think that it's interesting too to think, what we talked about earlier, is like, what would it have been like the day after if he had been successful? What would the country have been like? Mm-hmm. And I do think there's also, like, a conversation to be had around, like, if an attempt had been made on Biden's life and it was even unsuccessful, like, if the exact same thing happened on his life, what would the country have looked like the next day around, like, people in the streets getting rowdy?
I think we can kind of, let's move into the hypothetical, right?
Right.
And, like, this is all it is, right? Is we're not expert politicians or political science, professors. I think it's just a good thought study to just think about, like, how close, I think a lot of people said it, but the first one I remember hearing say it the night of the attempt assassination on Trump was Vivek Ramaswamy in an interview. And he said, it wasn't just Donald Trump who narrowly dodged, a bullet tonight, which technically he didn't dodge it. Like, he got shot in the head. Yeah. But he said America dodged a bullet, because if Trump had been killed, we could have seen the end to America as we know it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, at first, I was like, okay, that's a little dramatic.
Saber rattling, being a politician.
Yeah. And then I was just thinking about it. I was like, I'll be the first to admit, like, I know some pretty tilted, I wouldn't call them right wing, because I think that's often associated with Nazis, but I just know some pretty aggressive people, both men and women, who probably would have gone out in anger,
looking for a fight.
Mm-hmm. I'm not saying looking to kill or anything like that, but just looking for someone to, be angry at and shake their fist at and blame. And I think, we see that all the time on both sides, right? Like, we've seen that, just kind of retaliation ideology on both sides, and, I'll be the first to think that I'm gonna say it, bro. I think the severity of January 6th is severely blown out of proportion.
Oh yeah.
But those people, I think, are the same people who would have gone out and flipping cars and losing their minds, and
and I'd say at which point you could then label an insurrection, like the real version.
I think, like, you would just, like, you could label that as an insurrection, just as you did with, like, the Antifa BLM riots, where they literally took over federal buildings. Like, exactly in nature, that is insurrectionist,
right? And so, like, what I've always said about, like, the January 6th piece is like
was not good.
It was. I've also said it was not good. I was pissed when I saw it happen. Also, I've always, like, as it's been so, like, blown out of proportion, I think in so many ways, I'm also like, people should just be glad, like, everybody at that rally, like, didn't bring their arsenal.
Yeah.
And everybody at that rally, I'll guarantee you, there was enough guns owned by all those people to arm everybody in that crowd 10 times over.
Oh yeah.
Like if they had actually wanted to storm and take over something like that, it would have been a totally different like outcome. And so it's like this like thing where it's like, yeah, those types or whatever, like where you could have a shift where it's like, yeah, the day after assassination of Trump, if it was successful assassination of Trump, I think you very well could have seen, because I was even seeing like, whatever, all the comments in the peanut gallery of like being like, the word civil war gets tossed around rather flippantly these days.
Yeah, too flippantly.
And people being like, kind of like honestly, there's a lot of people out there like asking like, so is it now? And they're like genuinely kind of like, so are we doing this now? Like,
yeah.
Or like, oh wow, okay, like.
There's also, I think those are people who have no idea what war is,
Yeah, or like, and what are you like? What's the?
Where do you first go?
Yeah,
where do you rally first?
There's no Mason-Dixon line.
Exactly,
it's not an easy thing to know anymore.
Right?
And so it's like, and like as we learned of like the last 20 years of fighting an ideology in the Middle East,
Darwin's War too, baby.
What are you going to do with within America, just people an ideological war of neighbor to neighbor to neighbor to neighbor to neighbor all across the whole country? It's like there's no hill to capture. Like,
yeah, no, I agree. I think, if I'm hypothetical about it, right, and just trying to be, as not like shock value as possible, I think we would have seen that night something similar to BLM riots, just from the more conservative right-leaning side of politics. And I think we would have seen, just as much as I think like there are good people who go out and protest in those, riots and in those events, is a lot of bad actors who just use it as an opportunity to do harm.
To wild out. Yeah.
And I think we would have seen the same thing. A lot of people going out protesting, angry, saying like, this is a failure of America, and it has failed me as an American. And then a lot of bad actors going out and, whether that's arson, or other property damage, or harming other individuals directly. I think we could have seen this. Like, I think it is just as likely if Trump had been assassinated, we might have seen a version of a Kenosha kid just on the other side. Like someone else out there on the left who used a firearm in self-defense, and today it would be being reviewed critically. Right now it'd be like, and we'd be going over the precedents of that. I don't think we would have seen war, but I think we would have seen politically a pretty insane dissension of like walkouts from like DC. I think we would have seen a lot of people on the conservative side in Congress, senators, governors, stating that they are not going to be cooperating or voting on certain things or participating until a special investigation report was concluded to make sure there was no malpractice in the assassination. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't allowed to occur. And we would have seen like just a lot more gaslighting in regards to like this conspiracy of like it was a deep state thing. And because already, bro, like we're already seeing things like, dude, oh my gosh, I kind of want to just
Have you seen
I almost just said something that was like an exaggeration of political violence. So I'm changing my tongue. I wish Lauren Boebert would vanish into the mountains and just not speak on camera forever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wish she would just live out her life as a farmer or something, because she went on to say like Biden is at fault for this. Biden said to put Trump in the crosshairs and the bullseye. Biden is essentially, behind this assassination attempt. And I was just like, oh my, how can you think one that makes any logical sense?
Right.
From if especially if you're experienced in politics, that's just what, like this is a political campaign ad.
Right.
And this is not a call to violence. And like, how can you like think for 1 second that this is a morally good thing to say as well?
And if anybody's to like be accused of that, it'd be Trump. Like, because of his exaggeratory, boisterous language.
Sure.
Where it's like, I don't know if if he's ever physically harmed somebody in his life or not.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Whatever.
Him, whatever, but meaning but he says, this will be a bloodbath, like you're going to regret this. Like, these are these, whatever it is, like boisterous, language, or like same thing with like Biden, like who takes that as a threat? Like, you're not crosshairs now, or whoever. It's like, that's just, it's old men who are with big egos saying sayings, but then, if someone like Boebert come out, just pumping up the crowd and honestly using it as their own springboard.
People like Boebert, they just, any coverage on them is good coverage in their eyes, even if it's for saying like dumbass things that are going to probably be used to commit, like justify acts of violence. So that's honestly like, just as like disappointed and angry it makes me to see like a BBC reporter. The BBC reporter last week said Biden should murder Trump. He said because of the new Supreme Court ruling that a president can't be prosecuted for crimes he commits in office, which, to clarify, that bill just says a president won't be tried for possible crimes relating to their business that they conduct, which is like, if Biden had a cheeseburger stand he was running and did tax fraud, right? He won't be prosecuted he has immunity during the time for acting president, because acting president takes precedence in severity over tax fraud for his burger.
Yeah. And you don't think that Biden likes that rule either?
Yeah, exactly, right. But like, it's not like people don't understand, like, this is not just a thing that the Supreme Court said, like, oh yeah, the president could just start declaring the death of people and get away with it. Right. Like, that's not how it works. But this BBC journalist said, now that this passed, Biden should murder Trump. He must take action now and eliminate Trump. He should murder him. And it's just like, wow, that aged great, didn't it? Yeah. You know what I mean? And like, just as I'm angry at that, I'm equally angry at Boebert and like other people on the right saying things like this to only inflame things. Because both of them are not being cool. You know what I mean? Neither of those are cool heads. And it's very inflammatory. So I don't know. That's kind of where my hypotheticals are and like my concerns in the language surrounding it right now. It does make me sad to see like the everyday person literally thinking it is a moral position to wish the death for another person. No matter how much the words Hitler and Nazi get thrown around at Trump, like,
he's not that.
Ask anyone who lived in Germany when Hitler was rising to power. This ain't it, bud. Like that is not the situation we're in here.
Yeah.
And, even then, like, let's just say, like, would you, like, you wouldn't have any legal justification for when Hitler was rising to power to assassinate him, right? That's a hindsight action. You know what I mean? Like, to kill someone, we're talking about like killing someone based off of what you believe they will do down the road without them having committed any of those actions. Like, that gets into pretty like difficult moralistic relativity area, right?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then like you're gonna be killing a lot of people, based on like thought crimes, right?
It's like Minority Report.
Exactly. It is. That's where we start getting to when you start thinking that way. And so all that said, it's just sad to me to see that, because like also I say the same thing to people who are like, Biden is Hitler, Biden is Mussolini. I'm just like, is he though? Is Biden taking food out of your mouth? Yeah, is he like passing laws that like if you don't have,
you're giving him a lot of credit too.
Yeah,
like in some ways, like
okay, Biden's admin's Mussolini, right? You know what I mean? But it's just one of those things where I'm just like, gosh, you are like, you're generalizing and exaggerating to a degree that is harmful, not to just yourself but others around you. And people need to kind of
like, you don't know reflect. What you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're just speaking, you're just regurgitating words you've heard, and you don't even know the context of the things you're saying. So all that said, that's kind of my summary, I guess, on like hypotheticals and currently what I wish, my kind of call to action as, Mick, who's a nobody, is begging and pleading, be kind to people, show them kindness, and be vigilant, but I would encourage you to extend a hand in kindness before extending a fist in anger right now, because you're only probably going to make things worse if you go with the latter.
Yeah, escalating.
Any other thoughts from you, Pat? Any other kind of final closing things?
Not really. I mean, there is all sorts of things you could get into around like potential silly theories of conspiracy and this, that, the other. I personally think that this was like was what it was.
Yeah.
Disgruntled, angry, lone kid trying to make his mark and do what in his like psyche and brain and what he derived at was the thing that had to be done or whatever. But there's interesting things to look into. Like he was in a BlackRock commercial.
I did see that.
Like things like that or whatever. Like
weird.
Just like weird things like that, or whatever. Like, all those sorts of that sort of crap,
So strange.
But I think that it's obviously we're living in a time where I think it's not as bad as everybody thinks it is. Like, and I say this a lot in closing out the show, where it's like, do you have a heat source and a roof over your head? Are you ever hungry? Yeah, it's hard right now to buy a house, and it's hard to like make ends meet, and like you don't get to own a boat. You're not going to be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, whatever. All the lies you've believed about. You're not going to be a TikTok star who's just rolling in the millions. Like this is your life. You're middle class.
Current
That's
situation.
what it is. This is where you're at, and but your current situation is pretty damn good. You got a car. You maybe have a friend or family, some loved ones, whatever, people you can talk to, hang out with, have a beer on a Friday night. Like, I don't know, play your video games. That's that's a privilege or whatever. Everything's like just a comfort. Everything's a comfy privilege we have in this country. Now, I think that all that stuff could be lost and go away, but it's like at this like the point before where people are saying these throw around words flippantly like Nazi or Civil War and these things, and they know not what they say of like the true gravity of what a situation like that looks like. Like, I think that everybody's just too tuned up and tuned into to the doom scrolling.
Yep.
And then that becomes fact in their mind instead of gaining a little perspective on what their life actually is like.
Yeah, and in keeping in kind of what we have been going over through East of Eden, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking to our Christian audience, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer in you can't hold non-Christians accountable to the same morals you hold Christians to.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are out there and you say, hey, Christ is king, and I'm a Christian, I'm a believer,
mm-hmm.
and you are pro the assassination of any presidential candidate running right now, or you think you'd be happier if someone was killed in one of these incidences, I encourage you to really reflect on, the word timshel. It's a command in Scripture by God to have dominance over sin, to conquer sin,
mm-hmm.
and to deny sin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a promise of God that if you are a follower of Christ, through the Holy Spirit, you will be led away from sin.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to surrender yourself to that and allow, God's morality to replace your own.
Mm-hmm.
And as it says in in East of Eden, timshel can be framed as thou mayest, like thou mayest rise above sin.
Mm-hmm.
You have the opportunity, you have the personal choice
mm-hmm.
to not sin, to be good. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I really encourage people to just reflect, like, are you choosing to be good?
Mm-hmm.
Any action you take, can you say that is the good action? That is the sinless, the sinless choice.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't outright say, yep, then you're probably in error and you're probably going against God's ways.
Mm-hmm.
And you're probably not exercising character of Christ. Because unfortunately there are, I know, just a lot of believers who justify wishing harm on someone who is not Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And even then, go see the new Bonhoeffer movie. He really wrestled with assassinating Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? He felt that the character of Christ was a potential obstacle to justifying his involvement in an assassination of an evil man.
Mm-hmm.
So check that out. But that's, I think, my final thing, right? Just because I know we have a lot of believers who listen in on this. Yeah,
I agree. It's that in your free will, you have the choice. And in the, and like you're saying, if you feel like if you feel like you'd feel happier about someone dying also at the same time, like, so like, especially like lots of Christians today too, is like, and if you also are elevating your political figure to a darn near Messiah
ideologies,
and then and that idolatry and there's room to do some thought there too around what's that look like? Is that good?
Is that good?
Or
is that a sin? Yeah. So anyways, thanks for joining us. Nice little quick wrap up, Mick and Pat show. We'll be back with the final part of East of Eden next week, part 4, in the summary of the book. So catch that out. Hopefully you've been enjoying the dog-eared dialogues. We just released a fun little short Let's Play game where we played a game together, and that was really fun. So hopefully we'll be doing more of those if we could find other good games that lend themselves to kind of the audio format of podcasts. But all that said, Pat, got to sign off for me?
Till next time. Thanks for tuning in. If you love this episode, drop us a review. If you have qualms or comments, leave us a voicemail on our website. While you're there, check out our latest news, merch, and deals from our sponsors. Till next time, Ken.